Welcome to the So What from BCG, the podcast that explores the big ideas shaping business, the economy, and society. I'm Georgie Frost. In this episode, who wants to be a CEO? With Christine Barton, BCG's CEO Advisory Lead for North America. Christine, welcome. What is your So What?
The role of CEO has always been a stressful role, but today's CEO and aspiring CEOs are faced with a more complex, uncertain, volatile context than ever before. And unfortunately, there are some early warning indicators that that role may not be as aspirational or as desirable as it once was. But the sustainability of the role is in the grasp of CEOs, and it's in the support structures around them that can make this role livable now and better prepare future CEOs.
In an era of constant transformation, AI disruption, and intense personal scrutiny, the CEO role has never been more powerful or more punishing. The leader stands alone, overseeing the full scope of the organisation, its potential and its problems. It's a perspective that brings immense responsibility. There are moves only CEOs can make. But is the role still attracting the right people? And what can companies do to ensure their leader is truly empowered to lead?
I'm sure at any point in time, it felt like a potentially stressful role. It has always been a large scoped role. But I do think over the last 10 or 15 years in particular, you have a context of increasing volatility and a context of increasing uncertainty because there have been these big shifts demographically and societal megatrends, wild card uncertainty and acceleration, and then very notably, the pace of disruptive technological advancement, mostly to the good of business and society, but not exclusively to the good that CEOs are navigating. Another notable one is just your stakeholder expansion and expectation. And oftentimes, those incentives and those priorities among very powerful stakeholders are in conflict. And CEOs are now navigating all of that context.
The role, given everything you've just said, is obviously, much more complex. There's also other elements to just the sort of business aspect to it. And of those, I think politics, but also personality. And maybe this is my just perception as a journalist, but it seems like we care a lot more about the person who's at the head of a company.
I think that is true. And I think CEOs are feeling that among not just shareholders, which used to always want direct access to the CEO, but you have these other stakeholder expectations now in terms of direct access to the CEO, and then also an expectation that the CEO is leading with authenticity and vulnerability. And one thing that we hear from a number of CEO candidates is their level of comfort or discomfort with that perceived aspect of the role. There are a number of examples of CEOs who lead very purpose driven, very authentic, but who do not lead with their family or their relationships or their personal political beliefs at the front. And so I think there's still a lot of room to be in the CEO role and not have your personal life front and center. But there is not a lot of room to be in the CEO role and be able to stand behind the separation of business and personal. You are still going to have to be personally authentic, personally vulnerable, personally truthful, and high integrity. But that is distinct from leading with your personal life front and center.
I want to know a bit more about the person. And obviously, there are many, many, many CEOs. And you've met many, many, many CEOs. But I'm curious if there are trends that we're seeing that over the last couple of decades have shifted. Are we getting, I don't know, people with different degrees? Are we getting, people who are just different attitudes? Is there other themes that we can draw out of the type of people who head to the top? Because the question we're asking is who wants to be a CEO? So I want to know, who is a CEO right now?
So it's fairly stable what the pathways to CEOs is. And by that, I mean the role that they have before they get their first time nod as a CEO. The other thing that has historically seen a lot of stability, but I hypothesize that we are going to see more diversity, is leadership styles that are heavily concentrated in CEOs among the broader business population. And so some of those styles are leadership styles that are very strong on vision and inspiration of others toward their vision of where the enterprise and where the company needs to go. Another would be CEOs who are high on influence. So they get things done through the influence of others. And then the third popular leadership style is results orientation, delivery, outcomes, and results above almost anything else. And I do think that is going to change as the little d diversity of CEOs change, whether that is demographic diversity, whether that is coming through other pipeline roles to CEOs like chief merchandising officer in the retail sector, as an example, whether that's cognitive diversity, whether that's through leadership diversity. So I would posit over the next 10, 15 years, we will see more leadership styles in CEOs reflecting the fact that we will see different types of CEOs. Now, what has changed, which is an worrisome, if not yet alarming trend, and I haven't seen the definitive research on this yet. So I'm going to quote a couple of things that I think are adding up to the role being less aspirational, less attractive. So you are getting an increase in CEO departures. It's about a 9% increase in 24 from 23. When you look at the S&P 500, you see about a 21% increase from 2023. When you look at a broader subset of public company chief exits, that's 24% more. Even more concerningly is when you ask CEO and enterprise level two or the direct reports to CEOs, their sentiment about the role, 71% of those leaders, reporting increased stress, more than half of them reporting concern about personal burnout, about 40% of that population considering leaving their leadership role in the next 12 months. One, it means that, folks are less interested in being serial CEOs. And then you couple that with the board trend and the governance trend to limit sitting CEOs to one external board or public board. And then you just have less experienced people in the CEO role and in the boardroom that are sitting CEOs. As an overall trend, if it's accelerated, that's where I think it gets worrisome.
We're seeing CEOs stepping down, but also, I suppose, equally worrying, fewer high potential leaders we're hearing are wanting to step up. What are potential CEO candidates telling you now?
We're really hearing more so than I have in the past a fundamental question of, do I want the role for myself and do I want the role for my family, however that is defined for the candidate? And some of the things that are concerns for them are the impatience in the public market, a lot of concern about, can I lead with authenticity? Can I meet the expectations of employees and consumers and protect the privacy of my family? Given, more recent news, I think there are concerns about personal security. And then I think there is the underlying question of, would I really be excited and energized by the CEO role? Or do I want it for ego reasons and not for core self or true self reasons? In the last several years, business leaders and business executives and CEOs had enjoyed much more trust than their counterparts in politics, their counterparts in academia. And that trust in business institutions is starting to erode overall. So I think you also have the context of eroding trust in the role that weighs on aspirants and candidates to the role.
We will talk about the role that businesses can play in trying to help attract and retain top leadership and the sort of structures you can have in place to allow leaders to lead well. But I do want to look at what it is that CEOs can really focus on. We can't change what's going on in the world. We can't change the stress of the job. It is what it is. It's a stressful job. But you can change, I suppose, what you choose to focus on and have the biggest impact on. Because I imagine a lot of CEOs, one of the things that they fall down on and one of the reasons that they burn out is because they take on too much. So, what really should CEOs be focusing on? Where can they have the biggest impact on their organizations? And where can they let some things be delegated out?
I think there are four things that CEOs are uniquely positionally advantaged to create for enterprises. And so I would argue, within the balance that always needs to be created between, near term delivery and investing and transformation on mid and longer term horizons, those four are really being able to articulate a differentiated organizational purpose that is the North Star and that is very authentic to the enterprise. Do I have a vision? So, this is all kind of in the creating purpose and clarity. Do I have a vision for where we need to go in the next 3 to 5 years? Do I have a big declarative ambition for the value we are going to create? And do I have a point of view on the strategy or the actions we are going to take to get there? And importantly, what we are not going to do to get there. So that's one big bucket of activities. The second is, am I creating focus for the organization and what I will call force? So, focus is probably pretty clear. It's translating that organization's vision into strategic priorities, or some people will call that the what I'm going to go do, and the priorities of what enabling capabilities I'm going to build, or the how I'm going to go do that. Force is then concentrating resources, whether that is your talent resources, whether that's your P&L expense, whether that's your capital investment, but behind the priorities for maximum incremental value creation. Too many CEOs and executive teams have a more historically based way in which they allocate P&L expense and capital allocation, and I would argue you really need to be distorting behind maximum incremental value creation. So that's creating focus and force. That's all great and good, but if you can't generate enough incremental time to be able to work on any time frame other than near-term delivery, none of that's going to happen. So the next set of activities is creating capacity in the organization. This is more than just resource management, although that is an element of creating capacity. But this is really making sure that you are eliminating the barriers that exist in an organization. That might be anxiety. A lot of times organizations will call that anxiety fatigue, but I am a big believer it's much more anxiety than it is actual exhaustion or fatigue. It is building teams that are fit for not only purpose today, but where you're taking the organization in the mid and long term, enabling processes and tools that help in between the functions of organizations. That might be enabling technology that allows functions to automate so they can do things faster and work more cross functionally. And then the last set of activities that I think CEOs are uniquely suited to kind of create for organizations is what I'm going to call drive and accountability. So there has to be sufficient organizational stability, and that has to be durable. CEOs have a huge role in inspiring individuals to believe that they can achieve more than they thought possible. They have a huge role in generating enthusiasm and energy in the organization, and they have a responsibility to create a culture of transparency, mutual accountability, and pace. So that's all the things under creating drive.
What sort of things do you think that CEOs can remove or reduce or mitigate within their organizations?
So there's a couple of things. And the first of that is unnecessary low or no value added complexity. CEOs often, because that complexity doesn't just exist in the functional pyramid. If it exists in the functional pyramid, the CFO can reduce that in the financial and reporting processes, or the head of HR can reduce that, complexity in the context of delivering HR and talent solutions. But a lot of times, the complexity either exists in the core business processes, and the complexity exists between functions. So it is not clear who owns driving the cleanup of that complexity when it exists cross functionally. And that's why CEOs are so uniquely positioned to have an ambition on reducing that low or no value added complexity and driving to getting at those core cross functional big business processes in doing so, and setting very bold agendas and having the discipline to measure the reduction of that complexity. The other place CEOs are positionally advantaged is reducing what I would call unconstructive or unhealthy friction. And this is unconstructive conflict. It typically might be emotional, it might be rooted in grievances, it might be kind of rooted in lack of transparency. But moving first and foremost, their direct reports, also called first teams, into constructive, healthy debate, enhanced transparencies, intentional teams, and the commitment of those intentional teams to shared values, what I'll call kind of genuine affection for one another. And that genuine affection comes when I am holding the team to mutual accountability, but I am very invested in your personal success in your role and setting the behaviors and the teaming intentionality to create great teams, first at the top and then throughout the entire organizational pyramid.
So we've had the so what. What about the now what? What are the next practical steps that can be taken to make the CEO role more appealing, more aspirational?
Let me try to frame it in a way that is reducing executive burnout, which presumably will increase the aspiration of the CEO role. So, I think one of the first things to do is to be intentional about the first teaming and culture, making sure that those team members know not only the value creation ambition, the vision, the strategy, but how they should be coming together in support of the enterprise and in support of one another. So that might be getting intentional about the objectives of the first team. That might be looking at the composition of the first team and introducing different perspectives, different cognitive starting points, different leadership styles to balance out that first team. That might be getting intentional about the behaviors you want to see from that first team. That might be creating a lot of opportunities for that first team to build genuine affection for one another, where they are deeply personally committed to mutual success and mutual accountability.
What else do you think that companies can do next?
I think the other things that you can look at to introduce an element of predictability and leverage into the role is looking at what some people call their drumbeat management system or their drumbeat accountability system. So that is, how is that first team coming together on what rhythms in the business, at what mix of topics that are meant to deliver the business in the short term, so the next quarter, the next year, deliver the business in the medium term, the next 2 to 3 years, and what investments are the business making that will play out over longer perspective, 4 or 5, and in some asset heavy industries, kind of 10 years. So really looking at the use of the time together as a first team and how both effective and efficient that is.
Is there anything else that you think that they can do?
Look at places where energy is injected in the leaders and in the organization and rethink the amount of time that they are spending on that. In general, that'll often be spending more time with frontline leaders. That'll be looking external to the organization. The larger an organization gets, the more myopic and introverted and inwardly focused they get, as measured by natural language processing on what they actually say in the external world. So, upstart, fast growing companies talk a lot about competitive structure, competitors, market structure, consumers, technologies, and very large organizations talk a lot about internal processes. And so injecting an opportunity to get that external perspective and the energy that comes from that, whether that's using your branded partners and your trusted advisors to provide that external perspective, whether that's getting out and being consumer and customer facing, whether that's getting out and being frontline employee facing, looking for those injections of energy into the organization are another place.
What about the people who want to be CEOs?
For the individuals that may be aspiring or maybe current CEO candidates, looking very intentionally at the levers they control. How are they spending their time, and is their actual time spent relative to their intended time uses? How are they working within the context of their first team? Are there things they should be bringing to that team and to the CEO that would make their shared time together more effective and more efficient, or make their shared time with the board more effective and more efficient? And then, thirdly, what structures do they have in their personal life that gives them leverage? So, are they eliminating the activities in their personal life that drain them, that can be outsourced to free up time, not necessarily to invest back into work, sleep, exercise, that will give you that resilience to avoid burnout and stay present?
Christine, thank you so much. And to you for listening. We'd love to know your thoughts. To get in contact, leave us a message at thesowhat@bcg.com. And if you like this podcast, why not hit subscribe and leave a rating wherever you found us. It helps other people find us too. And if you'd like to know more about the moves that CEOs can make, check out the link in the show notes.